It's real clear here, Michael, what's going on here. And the reason I think we have to keep raising this point is because we got to remind folk, some of these people can be hollering, oh, man, I had money in my pocket. Yeah, you might have had money in your pocket, but there was some other folks getting beat upside their head because of this fool.
Absolutely, Roland. I'm glad you're talking about this and putting this all together. One of the reasons why you had money in your pocket was because of the $1.9 trillion American Rescue Plan, which gave you $1,400 stimulus checks and gave you the child tax credit, which lifted 1 million black people, 1 million black children out of poverty. And that was passed by Biden and Harris through a Democratic Congress and Democratic Senate, and no Republicans in the House or Senate passed that bill. So you need to understand how this actually works, okay? Secondly, I'm glad you mentioned Jefferson Beauregard Sessions, because not only did Jeff Sessions do that speech and say they need to take a hands-off approach to policing, and he was Donald Trump's first attorney general. He also, you mentioned him trying to back out of the Baltimore consent decree. He also tried to back out of the Chicago consent decree as well, which was being put in place right when Trump took over, when he won in 2016. Something else that Jefferson Beauregard Sessions did that does not get talked about a lot is President Obama in 2013 put together the National Commission on Forensic Sciences. And this was designed, he brought together experts in the field, and this was designed to reduce the number of people who are wrongfully convicted based upon bad science, bad forensics, and convicted and also put on death row. Jefferson Beauregard Sessions disbanded this commission when he became attorney general because he said it was not necessary. OK, and we know that African Americans disproportionately make up the people on death row, like Marcellus Williams that we just saw a few days ago be executed. OK, so. And you talked about the Department of Justice in Project 2025. One of the things that Project 2025 wants to do is to disband the Department of Justice. Right. But the Department of Justice was created in 1870 largely to protect the new rights given to African Americans. We're
actually going to talk in the next hour about Project 2025. Last couple of days, I've been talking to y'all about what's been happening in terms of what a Donald Trump DOJ would look like. And I've laid out to you a variety of things. And one of the areas that people need to understand, I keep talking about this over and over and over again, how Donald Trump and Republicans, how they've been attacking all of these efforts to hold police departments accountable. Yesterday, the DOJ, Civil Rights Division, Kristen Clark, they announced what they found against Lexington, Mississippi. Now, I told you all this, and it's still real. The Biden-Harris administration, their DOJ, they have launched 12 patterns and practices investigation against police departments nationwide. That doesn't count the investigation of the juvenile detention centers in Texas and the other efforts. It doesn't even talk about what they've been doing when it comes to redlining and housing discrimination. This is just patterns and practices. But I want you to put this in perspective. In 4 years of Donald Trump's Department of Justice, I told you this yesterday, how many patterns and practices investigation have they done? One. That was Vial Platte, Louisiana. One. You literally have an attorney general in Jeff Sessions, who was Trump's first attorney general, and then Bill Barr, where they said, you know what, we're going to pull back from these consent decrees. We're really not going to do this because this is hurting police morale. Oh, it's a few bad apples out there, but, you know, it's not really that big of a deal. And so we need to pull back because the cops need to be able to do their job. He and Barr complained about in the post-George Floyd world, this was just too much, and police were getting criticized, and they were being held accountable, and so that just simply wasn't fair. You know, that's real. And so if you think that that's what Donald Trump's Department of Justice looked like the first time, what the hell do you think it's going to look like the second time? Remember, Baltimore had a consent decree that the federal judge is about to approve. Trump gets in, Sessions tries to get rid of the consent decree. And the federal judge in the city of Baltimore said, absolutely not. They didn't like the consent decree that was against the Chicago Police Department. In fact, Jeff Sessions, and I'm going to play it later, literally complained complained about that, saying, well, this just wasn't right. I mean, we need more police in Chicago. He wasn't standing up for civil rights. He wasn't standing up for regular, ordinary people. Jeff Sessions was literally saying we should be doing more to protect the cops as opposed to the citizens, and he was giving lip service. And I'm going to show you several documents and play some video. I'm going to bring in my panel right now. Christy Lopez, a professor at Georgetown Law School. Samuel Simgawe, founder of Mapping Police Violence in Los Angeles. Renee Hall is the national first vice president for the National Organization of Black Law Enforcement Executives. Noble, she is the former police chief in Dallas. Glad to have all three of y'all are here. Before we start, this is literally what Jeff Sessions had to say about how police, they've just been undermined all across the country.
We've undermined the respect for our police and made oftentimes their job more difficult. And it's not been well received by them, and we're not seeing the kind of effective community-based, street-based policing that we found to be so effective in reducing crime, I think. And so the Department of Justice has an absolute duty to ensure that police operate within the law. And if they violate the law, they've committed a crime just as much as any other citizen who commits an assault. And we'll do our duty. I've done that as United States Attorney to prosecute police officers who do wrong. But we need, so far as we can, in my view, help police departments get better, not diminish their effectiveness. And I'm afraid we've done some of that. So we're going to try to pull back on this. And I don't think it's wrong or mean or insensitive to civil rights or human rights. I think it's out of a concern to make the lives of people, in particular the poor communities, minority communities, live a safer, happier life, so that they're able to have their children outside and go to school in safety, and they can go to the grocery store in safety and not be accosted by drug dealers and get caught in crossfires or have their children seduced into some gang. So we can do better about this, and that is part of what my thoughts are about this whole situation.
Lying the whole time. You know, when he left, 3 Republican attorney generals put this opinion piece in the Washington Post. Go to my iPad. When you go through this piece right here, it was Bill Barr, Edwin Meese, Michael Mukasey. When you go through this piece, they talk about the great job that he did and his deep commitment to the Department of Justice and how, look at this, he made him a nominee of unexcelled temperament. And it goes on and on. Sessions took office after the previous administration's policies had undermined police morale with the spreading Ferguson effect, causing officers to shy away from proactive policing out of fear of prosecution. You see how they tried to justify steep declines in the rate of violent crimes from 1992 to 2014 were reversed in the last administration's final 2 years, with violent crime generally up 7%, blah, 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 blah. Many people were concerned that the hard-won progress of earlier years would be lost. Look at this here. So when you keep going, and I was going through it, y'all, and something just jumped out at me. I kept going through it. And how he did immigration, and he did this, and America's freedom of speech, and how he protected religious expression. And I just kept going. And I kept going. Look at this here. Hezbollah, narco-terrorism. You get to the end. Not a single word about police reform or civil rights in this entire piece. That, folks, is what you need to understand in what you are dealing with. Now, why am I laying all of this out? Because Donald Trump is already talking about his tough talk. In the next hour, we're going to talk about Project 2025 and what it says here. But you need to be mindful that if Donald Trump gets back into the Oval Office, what you heard yesterday, that ain't happening. You're not going to have patterns and practices investigation. You're not going to have police who are held accountable. You're not going to have a Department of Justice that's aggressive when it comes to prosecuting hate crime laws. You're not going to have a Department of Justice that is aggressive in dealing with racial, first of all, racism in lending, housing discrimination. None of that stuff is happening. All of those things that you've seen in the last 4 years under the Biden-Harris DOJ ain't going to happen. In one area where black folks must be scared to death is if Donald Trump allows police to run amok in this country. I want to start with you, Christy. You wrote a piece in the Marshall Project, why Jeff Sessions should police the police. Consent decrees can improve law enforcement even in cities that aren't investigated. One of the last acts of Jeff Sessions, Christy, was putting out a memo, literally changing how the DOJ targets and deals with consent decrees. And so we are dealing with a Republican Party that is so hardcore right-wing, they despise consent decrees, which are there to protect regular, ordinary citizens.
Yeah, thanks, Roland. That's exactly right. Consent decrees are hardly radical documents. All they do, they're documents that say, hey, we found that you're violating the Constitution and violating people's rights and people are getting hurt and killed. And so this is a plan for you to violate or to actually follow the law. You know, it is a pro-rule of law document. And one of the things that was so not ironic, but telling about Jeff Sessions is that he couched much of what he said in this rhetoric of states' rights, which I think is chilling enough coming from Jefferson, Beauregard, Sessions. But he was trying to say that the federal government shouldn't be going in and telling police what to do, that the states should do that. And yet, after he insisted that the Civil Rights Division retreat from the consent decree negotiations in Chicago, the Illinois Attorney General stepped in to continue those negotiations and to reach a consent decree. And he actually made the Department of Justice file an opposition to what the state was doing. So this isn't about any sort of, principle or, higher sort of commitment to the rule of law. It's just about not wanting to rein in the police and letting them do. He wants to let them do what they want. And we know that Trump feels the same way, and we can expect that this next administration would be much worse than the last one.
Renee, what jumps out here is that the reason the federal government is so important here is because of oversight. In the history of black people in this country, the last place black people could get justice was because of the federal laws, because of what Christy just said, how states' rights and how these states operated. Black folks look to the federal government, not just when it comes to policing, not just when it comes to hate crimes, but in education, in housing, in everything, because the U.S. Constitution was totally different than many of these state constitutions. So, but when you have individuals who are giving this states' rights rhetoric, who do not want the DOJ to have a firm hand, that should scare to death regular, ordinary citizens, because if left to their own, up to their own devices, we're going to see more Lexington, Mississippis all across the country. And we know about the patterns and practices investigation and the consent decrees that have been in Cleveland, that have been in Chicago, that have been in Philadelphia, that have been in New Orleans, and on and on and on.
Thank you, Roland. What I would like to say is I grew up in the Detroit Police Department, and we had a consent decree for more than 13 years. And what I will tell you about a consent judgment is that it requires a police department to be constitutional. It requires a police department to ensure that the community is thought about. And I think what I need to deny here or refute is the fact that a consent decree somehow limits officers' ability to do their job. And none of that exists. It requires officers to do their jobs constitutionally and make sure that when they do their jobs, that they're taking the consideration of individuals, because there is dignity in authority. And that's what a consent decree actually requires of a police department. What I will say is that under the Trump administration, when you say you're going to unleash law enforcement or give law enforcement total power and authority, power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely. So no one should have absolute authority and no one should be above the law. What the requirement is in this country and leaders in law enforcement want is to make sure that we focus on the safety of our officers and the safety of our community, and they're not mutually exclusive. We want to make sure that everyone has an opportunity to have an encounter. Everyone needs to have the opportunity to call on law enforcement if there is a concern. But they also need to have the right that when law enforcement shows up, that they show up ethically, integral, and with the utmost respect, even when they're showing up to take someone to jail. And I think that when we continue to perpetuate the thoughts that police officers will have this ultimate authority and that there's some level of corruption in that, we put officers at risk as well. We look at when we villainize a particular segment of the community. As we would say, Haitians have been identified in this country right now. Haitians are ultimately Black people. So we are we're victimizing these individuals by placing them in harm's way, but we're also victimizing police officers, because the perception is when you run across someone who is Haitian, or am I Haitian? So the question is, a Black person in this country, there's a fear. So not only is that Black person, that Haitian person at risk, so is that officer, because now the perception is it's me versus you. So what I think that happens when we unleash these unfettered, untethered voices about what law enforcement should look like, or no consent judgment, or no holds upon what police are able to do, transparency and accountability, that we're creating an unsafe environment for everyone.
See, the thing, Samuel, and why I'm raising this, because this should be scaring folks to death. And I am specifically speaking to these Black men and Black women out here, and I see these people just chat, Trump. And I'm like, y'all don't understand what's going on here. This has been, under Biden-Harris, this has been the most aggressive Department of Justice Civil Rights Division since Robert Kennedy. And if Trump gets back in, all of these civil rights efforts, putting prison guards, wardens in jail for abusing inmates, as I said, the redlining, the mortgage fraud, the housing discrimination, the police patterns and practice investigation, all of those things are going away if the hard right gets back in, because the likes of the Senator Tom Cotton, they want more people in jail. They don't care if people are beaten. They don't care if people are brutalized, and they've shown that.
Absolutely. And one of the big reasons why you see Donald Trump and the right wing so angry and so intent on rolling back this progress that the Biden-Harris administration has made is because these consent decrees are making a difference in cities across the country. We did my organization, Mapping Police Violence, did one of the largest data collections around use of force ever conducted in this country. We got data from thousands of different law enforcement agencies across the country, including most of the agencies that are under consent decrees. And what we found was the vast majority of agencies under consent decrees reduced police use of force over time, saw substantial reductions in police use of force, especially in places like in Baltimore, places like Seattle, even places where the Justice Department stepped up and did an investigation, and state AGs had to step in and finish and put those police departments under consent decrees, like in Chicago, where you see a reduction in police use of force about 40% over the past several years under that oversight. So these consent decrees are working in protecting communities, especially Black communities, from police violence. And so we can't allow the Trump administration to roll that progress back. That's exactly what they want to do. We need to actually do the opposite and build on the progress that the Biden-Harris administration has laid out by actually expanding the breadth of police departments that are under that oversight. So currently, going all the way back to the beginning of pattern and practice investigations back in 1994 to the present day, there have been about 80 police departments that have undergone pattern and practice investigations. And not all of those have been put under consent decrees. In a nation with 18,000 different law enforcement agencies, so that's less than 1% of all the law enforcement agencies in the country have been under that level of scrutiny. And we know that the issue of police violence and racism in policing is not limited to only 1% or fewer than 1% of agencies. It is a systemic issue that, in fact, when we look at the data around use of force, more than 70% of all law enforcement agencies are demonstrating racial disparities in police use of force. More than 80% of all law enforcement agencies are reporting racial disparities in arrests, including in Lexington, Mississippi, where the DOJ report showed that 1 in every 4 residents in the town, a town of 1,200 people, 1 in every 4 residents was arrested by the police department, and black people were arrested at more than 17 times the rate of white people. So think about the level of police violence and intervention and oppression and incarceration that people are experiencing, not only in Lexington, but all across the country. That's why we need the DOJ to step up what it's doing and why we can't go back by putting Donald Trump in the driver's seat.
Christy, you said something that I thought that was really important when you talked about, and Renee, you also said the same thing, that it's not like it's stopping cops from doing their jobs, okay? The police who are complaining, they're complaining because they're mad they can't beat folks up. They can't rough them up. They can't call them the N-word. They can't do the type of things. I mean, cops in Chicago, they admitted using the N-word. They admitted dropping gang members off in rival territories just to see them run and scurry off. Those type of things happen. And go to my iPad. Christy, you said this here. You said, during the 6 years I spent investigating police departments and negotiating consent decrees for the Justice Department Civil Rights Division, I cannot remember attending any gathering related to policing when I wasn't approached by someone from a place the Justice Department had never investigated and probably never would, who still said consent decrees had improved policing in their city. That was the earnest lieutenant eager to tell me of changes that his department made to training and use of force reporting. The community leaders who told me how he and others had convinced town officials to change the way fines and fees are collected after pointing them to our Ferguson consent decree. The sergeant telling me she had read every one of our consent decrees and kept her chief apprised to ensure their department had mechanisms to detect and respond to incidents of officer misconduct. Law enforcement officials sometimes sent me new policies and trainings revised after reviewing our consent decrees. The reality is there are cops, there are commanders, there are chiefs who understand and who want these things. It was the mayor of New Orleans who called the DOJ in. And so you've seen these things, but what you really have is you have fraternal order police, you got unions and others. What they cannot stand is the one word that people hate the most, accountability. And that's why they despise consent decrees. And folks on the right want to go along with them because they don't want to hold them accountable for their actions.
Yeah, I think that's really true. They don't want accountability. And, you saw in the Lexington report how much accountability is needed. They had a chief who called people the N-word, and before that was calling black people routinely boy, right? So this was their chief of police. So you can imagine the atmosphere in that community. And people don't even want accountability for that kind of department and that kind of chief. But I want to be clear that this is hard. If it was easy to change policing, you wouldn't need all of these different people, the Department of Justice, civil rights attorneys working on it, right? It's hard, but we have to keep in mind, one of the things I learned at DOJ was that a lot of policing is not about public safety. What you saw in Ferguson is the same thing you saw in the Lexington report, that it's for revenue. You oftentimes see that the police are doing something that other people could be doing, but we've just gotten so used to the police doing it that we invest all of our money in policing like they were doing in Lexington. So I think that is one of the things we really have to be mindful of, is that this is we need lots of people, including the Department of Justice, to work on this. And we need to recognize that it's difficult, but none of it is about, pitting safety against rights. It's really a recognition that in order to have safe communities and vibrant communities and healthy communities, you have to have police that are respecting the rule of law and that are staying in their lane, and let everybody else do what they need to do to grow and support that community.
Renee, I want you to jump with that comment, but I want to put this question first, and that is, you've been a police chief, and a lot of people think, great, new police chief, stuff is going to change. But the reality is, it is hard as hell when you start drilling down, because I saw it living in Chicago. Cops who ran superintendents out. I've seen other cities where police officers, oh, hell no, we're going to oppose every single thing. I've talked to police chiefs who have been frustrated that even though they have this lofty title, they actually can't turn this battleship around because of massive resistance of people who do not want to do the right thing by its citizens. Go ahead.
So I wanted to start by saying I would be remiss if I did not tell you that when we speak of law enforcement, it is unfair to speak in generalities and in absolutes. I spent more than 2 decades in law enforcement in 2 major cities, in Detroit and in Dallas. And I would have been appalled if people felt that I was this racist police officer who was unethical and used unnecessary force on a regular basis. So I just want to say that we're not talking about all police, but we do have individuals in law enforcement that challenge the ethics and the integrity of law enforcement. And it's those individuals that we speak of. And so it's those individuals that if we allow to go unchecked, if we allow there to be no accountability and no transparency, then that is the danger and what makes our communities unsafe, as much as having any level of violence or crime in our communities. But Roland, I do want to hit on the fact that leadership matters. And it's extremely important. And oftentimes when you have a leader who comes in and wants to address culture in law enforcement, and let's be clear, culture in law enforcement is what creates the Sonia Masseys, the George Floyds. When we see these and I could go on and on and on, but it's the culture of law enforcement that we see that creates that. But oftentimes when you have a leader who wants to challenge the status quo, you do have associations and unions who will do whatever it is that they can. And they have this power and this level of authority, this the financial ability to contribute to coffers of those city managers, mayors, council members, and even other elected officials to have the influence to push out those individuals who are attempting to change the trajectory of law enforcement and make sure that we're holding people accountable, that, we are making sure that those 21st century best practices are in place so that we don't have to have a consent judgment. There are patterns and practices that are ideal, that have been laid out by 21st century best practices that all agencies can follow to ensure that law enforcement is ethical and transparent and accountable and community oriented. We teach police how to be police. And if we have general orders and policies and procedures in our police agency that teaches them how to do it ethically, constitutionally, and with the highest level of integrity, then that's what we produce in our agencies. But we have to have the ability to create that without the influence of individuals who have a little bit more power than those leaders who show up to make those changes and who don't get an opportunity because there are forces that are working against them and force them out of that situation.
And Samuel, the reality is politicians, they covet the endorsements of police unions on the local, state, and federal level. They understand the power that they have, what they give in terms of resources. And also the public pays attention to who police unions and fire department unions, who they actually endorse. But what we're seeing here, we're seeing an increasing number, and y'all track this, an increasing number of people who are still being shot by police. the settlements are getting larger and larger as well. And then Donald Trump is on record. He wants to go after, and Sessions said this, and Barr said it, but he's made it clear. They are going to go after progressive DAs, and they talk about, oh, they're soft on crime. No, they're mad that district attorneys are actually increasing number or prosecuting cops for their actions.
Absolutely. And so, as you said, we're seeing increases in deadly police violence year over year. This year is already breaking records that were set the last year, which broke the record that was set the year before. So we can't pour gasoline on this fire and make everything worse by electing Donald Trump. That is exactly what he's promising to do, to leverage the power of the federal government to go after not the police departments that are the ones that have the highest rates of use of force, the ones with the largest racial disparities, the ones with the worst issues. No, he wants to weaponize the Justice Department to go after the prosecutors who are actually stepping up to do things differently and to not lock a whole bunch of people up for low-level, non-violent issues and arrest a whole bunch of people and charge them for turnstile jumping in the subways. He wants to go after those prosecutors. He wants to go after the police departments that are deciding to actually implement best practices and reduce police use of force over time in ways that keep communities, especially Black communities, safe from police violence. So he's promising to pour gasoline all over this issue and make things worse. Whereas I think the alternative is we actually can see with some of these police departments that are under consent decrees that have started to make progress, we can start to see what actually works, that other police departments can emulate best practices they can adopt to begin reducing police violence nationwide and finally begin bringing those numbers that we keep seeing going up and up down over time so communities can finally see some relief from record levels of police violence that we've been tracking. And it's important to note that, while we talk about record levels of people who are being shot and killed by the police, for every person killed by the police, what we've also found is that there are more than 300 additional people who are impacted by non-fatal police use of force and violence. So this issue is way bigger than often gets reported. And for every person who experiences police violence or use of force, there are hundreds more who are arrested, who are disrespected, who are unfairly and unlawfully incarcerated. So this is something that touches so many people's lives. And so this is where the federal government can really step up and continue to lead in making progress in addressing this issue rather than going back to the types of policies we saw under the Trump administration that was encouraging the worst impulses of law enforcement across the country.
Final comment from Christy and Renee. Samuel touched on that. Christy, you first. Are you concerned with what you have heard from Donald Trump, that if he beats Vice President Kamala Harris, that that spells doom and gloom for the DOJ Civil Rights Division that you spent so much time working for?
Yeah, I wish I was exaggerating, but I really do think it could be the end of the Civil Rights Division as we know it. And I don't say that lightly. There was great damage done under Sessions and the first time that Trump was president, but he's vowed to actually move people out of Civil Rights Division, have them do other things. And I don't think he's playing. On the other hand, you have right now, DOJ is really learning and building on the lessons they've learned over the years and making these consent decrees better. And so I really, they're just on the verge of really a breakthrough, and to go back to something that could really put us back 50, 100 years is really killing to me.
Renee, are you concerned when you hear Trump say, I will give police officers 100% immunity so they can do their jobs? So when you hear what he has to say, when you look at Project 2025, does that scare you in terms of, hey, this guy's saying I'm going to give free license to road cops to go out there and do whatever the hell they want and not face any retribution?
Not only does it give me pause for law enforcement, it gives me pause in this entire country. When I listen to an editor-in-chief use the N-word on a national radio station, when I see a representative in our congressional, in our Congress say send Haitians back to their dirty, filthy country. When I hear the racist rhetoric that comes out of the individuals' mouths, I'm concerned about this entire country, in addition to having individuals who violate policies, procedures, law when it comes to policing in our communities. To have unfettered access to do whatever it is that they want within our communities and not have to answer for it. Anyone would be concerned. And like I said before, I started with power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts, absolutely.
Renee Hall, Christy Lopez, Sammy Sengawe, I appreciate all three of y'all joining us on the show. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Folks, going to a break. We'll be right back. Roland Martin Unfiltered, right here on the Black Star Network. All right, folks, I want to bring in my panel right here to talk about the conversation that we just had. Michael Imhotep hosts the African History Network show out of Detroit. Robert Patillo hosts People, Passion, Politics, News and Talk 1380 WAOK out of Atlanta. And Jelana Jones, state representative and lawyer out of Houston. Robert, I'll start with you. I've been talking all the weekends. I've been specifically talking to black men and also these black women out here talking Trump. And I'm like, y'all can be foolish with y'all talk all y'all want to, but it's going to be hell for black folk. It's going to be hell in black communities because he is going to unleash thugs with guns and badges to do whatever they want to and make it clear. Y'all don't have to worry about a thing. We're going to look the other way.
Well, I think it's very clear if you just look at Project 2025. They lay out exactly what they're going to do. This is the first time in history that we don't have to guess what an administration will do. We have a full playbook on it. And just look at what happened with Clay Higgins in Congress yesterday or a couple of days ago. When you were talking about in this way about Haitian Americans, I'm Haitian American, so I take it personally. These people have no respect for black folks. They can't tell the difference between a African American, a Haitian, Nigerian, or anything else. They only see black and only see us as being someone that they need to control and destroy. And when you say you're going to pardon the January 6th protesters, you're going to pardon police officers who are convicted of excessive force, you're going to withdraw from consent decrees, you're going to make it easier for police officers. Just play the clips of Donald Trump talking to police organizations when he says, I want you to rough them up a little bit as they're getting into the car. Well, don't cradle their head when you're pushing them down. Use a little bit of extra force. But meanwhile, when he's getting arrested, he's in a black car. He's walked into his own private entrance. He takes a photo. He goes out. He doesn't want the same treatment for himself that he's prescribing for African-American men around the country. So for the people saying, well, Kamala is a cop or this, that, and the other, just look at Project 2025 and see exactly what they have planned for him. And don't just say you want the lesser of two evils. You have to understand that one side is legitimately evil, that there's a reason that you have white supremacists supporting him. If you want to know who someone is, look at the company they keep. You're going to see a lot of Confederate flags at those Trump rallies that you're not going to see at the Kamala Harris rallies.
It's real clear here, Michael, what's going on here. And the reason I think we have to keep raising this point is because we got to remind folk, some of the people can be hollering, oh, man, I had money in my pocket. Yeah, you might have had money in your pocket, but there was some other folks getting beat upside their head because of this fool.
Absolutely, Roland. I'm glad you're talking about this and putting this all together. One of the reasons why you had money in your pocket was because of the $1.9 trillion American Rescue Plan, which gave you $1,400 stimulus checks and gave you the child tax credit, which lifted 1 million black people, 1 million black children out of poverty. And that was passed by Biden and Harris through a Democratic Congress and Democratic Senate, and no Republicans in the House or Senate passed that bill. So you need to understand how this actually works, okay? Secondly, I'm glad you mentioned Jefferson Beauregard Sessions, because not only did Jeff Sessions do that speech and say they need to take a hands-off approach to policing, and he was Donald Trump's first attorney general. He also, you mentioned him trying to back out of the Baltimore consent decree. He also tried to back out of the Chicago consent decree as well, which was being put in place right when Trump took over, when he won in 2016. Something else that Jefferson Beauregard Sessions did that does not get talked about a lot is President Obama in 2013 put together the National Commission on Forensic Sciences. And this was designed, he brought together experts in the field, and this was designed to reduce the number of people who are wrongfully convicted based upon bad science, bad forensics, and convicted and also put on death row. Jefferson Beauregard Sessions disbanded this commission when he became Attorney General because he said it was not necessary. Okay, and we know that African Americans disproportionately make up the people on death row, like Marcellus Williams that we just saw a few days ago be executed. Okay, so and you talked about the Department of Justice and Project 2025. One of the things that Project 2025 wants to do is to disband the Department of Justice. Right. But the Department of Justice was created in 1870 largely to protect the new rights given to African Americans. We're
actually going to talk in the next hour about Project 2025. Let me quickly go to Jolanda here. Jolanda, again, Donald Trump is a threat to any community because he is going to allow law enforcement to do whatever they want. He said it, and if we thought they only investigated one police department the first time, they ain't looking at nobody if he wins again. They just gonna let them do whatever they want.
Well, and that's true. So that's why we need the Justice Department. That's why we need the Department of Education. But Project 2025 talks about increasing policing. Okay. When we have a whole bunch of police in black neighborhoods, we are getting locked up. Donald Trump, if you'll recall, was a big supporter of stop and frisk, which before this racist Supreme Court that Donald Trump packed, stop and frisk was determined to be unconstitutional. Donald Trump wants to take away money that would go to social programming. Social programming for, to help lower black folks not having opportunities to get the police out of their lives.
No. He said clearly he will withhold money from any city that does not institute stop and frisk.
But you just made my point for me. Okay, that's happening in Texas where we won't even expand Medicaid because it comes from Democrats and they want for people to be suffering health-wise. So it's the same sort of thing that they're doing with denying access to health care with the police. As I said before, some communities have the police who protect and serve. In other communities like us, like black people, so we need to just say it, where the police harass us, violate our civil rights, over-incarcerate us, sentence us longer than they sentence white people, kill us for things that they give probation to white people for, and that is what he is going to do. And so I don't care if somebody else has more money in their pocket, and the money they had in their pocket probably came from the Obama administration, but I don't feel like going there right now. And, if I'm fine, that's not okay. I need for all of us to be okay. I'm the mother of a black man. I have black nephews. And not that the police don't kill black women. Look at Sandra Bland. But black men are targets. And so if you have black kids, you need to be worried about Donald Trump. Look at what Donald Trump is saying about Haitians. Right. Because they're black. We don't need to guess what he's going to do. Right. Project 2025 tells us what he's going to do, and he's exercising it.
Actually, last night, I actually played a video from his website where he actually said it himself. So even when he disavows Project 2025, he actually said it for himself. Hold tight that, because we're going to actually pick up on that in the next hour when we talk about Project 2025.
For everything. Visit our website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. You can register for the online history classes that I teach. We deal with thousands of years of history. I teach 2 online history classes, Saturdays 4 p.m. to 6 p.m. and Sundays 4 p.m. to 6 p.m. Saturdays is Ancient Kemet, the Moors, and the Ma'afa, understanding the transatlantic slave trade, what they didn't teach you in school. And then on Sundays, Black resistance movements, from Christopher Columbus to the Haitian Revolution and the Black Power movement, 1492 to 1968. So we have classes coming up this weekend. Classes on sale, $80. We do the sessions live. All the sessions are archived and recorded. You can go back and watch it any time. We have a bundle pack of courses. You can register for both classes also. I do a PowerPoint presentation with book references, articles, video clips. Even after the course is over with, you still have access to the full class. You can go back and watch it anytime. And then Ancient Kemet, the Moors, and the Ma'afa, Understanding Transatlantic Slave Trade. That meets this weekend also. You can we have the course outline here that you can download as well. So it gives you a lesson plan for each class session. There's about 100 articles that we reference. The first class is about 200 slides, 15 books that we reference. You don't have to buy any of the books to follow along in class. Click right here to download the lesson plan also, okay? I show you it's a very visual class, so I show you the excerpts of the books right on the screen, all right? Okay, so the content is PG-13. You can use this with your children as well. I don't do a lot of cursing. It's not overly vulgar or anything like that. It's nothing like